everybody. Welcome to Rachel's Reviews. And today we are talking about our favorite CG animation, non-Disney Pixar. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And we've done episodes already on our top 50. We've done episodes on Disney, Pixar, and on 2D animation. So it's been really fun. So now we're doing CG. And I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and Matt Brunet's here.
Hey everybody, I'm back.
Yes. And y'all will have to forgive me because I am not at full voice. I'm still kind of getting over some hay fever and recovering from my somewhat traumatic trip to Austin. That
I
so
didn't
yeah.
expect I didn't expect South by Southwest would be that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. You thought it would just be the movies that would be bad, but sadly it was all of Texas.
Yeah, I'm sure
Oh.
many people, even Texans, would agree with you there.
Yes. And so I have to give kind of a caveat to at least my 10 because what we did is I made like a top 50 list and we kind of approached this a little bit differently, but I made a top 50 list and then have been going through these different categories and picking all the different ones that fit the different categories. But I only had 7 on my top 50 list that were non Pixar, Disney, CG. So I had to add 3 that technically are not on my top 50 list. So that's my convoluted
Yeah.
explanation for why, if you look on Letterboxd, you won't see some of mine on there because I had to add 3 to this list to make a top 10. So there
No,
you go.
I understand. I was actually on the same boat as you because when I was looking through my like what I would consider to be among my best CG animated features, it was just recently I had to go and revise. There was one in particular that I was having a hard time trying to find. Like there was one empty spot. It was like, crap, what else can I fill? And it was just like
Yeah.
a toss up. So I was like, okay, I like this one, so I'll just put that there, like to give it variety.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, and there's one that we kind of debated on my list. Is it 2D or is it CG? And in these days of sort of hybrid animation that's getting increasingly blurred, which I love and I'm so excited about. But yeah, so we'll talk about that when we get to it. But why don't we dive in? And we'd love to hear in the comments section or on Twitter and wherever else you follow us, your favorites as well. But what do you have at number 10?
Well, I'm gonna do it in alphabetical order. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
actually have like a 10, 9, 8. So I'm with the first one, and I think I might as well hit it off with Adventures of Tintin. So,
Mm,
as I was saying, it is very rare that you would find an animated feature that uses CG in a very realistic manner, but at the same time trying to adapt something that has its own stylized look. And this one manages to capture it perfectly, like taking the classic stories of Hergé and bringing them to life onto this animated feature in a way that we haven't seen any other movie try to do since. And like some people could debate, oh, well, because it uses motion capture, we've seen a lot of them. But I would argue that with Tintin, it's so far the best one. Like, debatably,
mm,
even better than the Avatar movies. Because with this one, like I said, the fact that it would blend both the style of the comics and using a lot of realism and putting them together,
yeah.
this it's one of those combinations that it shouldn't work, but somehow it did. Like the characters are very recognizable to who they are, whether it be Tintin himself, Captain Haddock, and or Thompson and Thompson and stuff like that. But they actually look phenomenal. They actually managed to capture that look that perfectly blends together that realism and the stylized comic look. And not only that, but also the use of the animation, like with motion capture, it really works out great. It's so good to the point that it often happens where you forget that this is an animated movie. You forget that this is all CG because the way that they present everything in a realistic manner, it just it works out so well. It's so great. And not to mention that they really do help out to make the action scenes very exciting throughout. Like it is a very intense and a very engaging animated feature,
Yeah.
especially like one in particular is with the motorcycle. Like you get this one long shot of just Tintin going through the town with his motorcycle, and it's just like keeps falling apart bit by bit. But it's just a lot of fun to go through, especially like to chase the eagle and stuff like that. It's such a great time. But also, there is the story in which they've adapted comics and bringing in that spirit of Tintin onto the big screen, like to bring that to life. Like you add, in a way, it feels like a spiritual successor to Indiana Jones, or
Yeah.
this is what most of the Indiana Jones movies wish it could be. Where like you do have this adventure where you have to go and find, like to go and find the big treasure at the end. But just going through bit by bit to like dodge the enemies, like to stop the bad guy from them to get it first, and then like we see Tintin and Haddock where they go through their adventure as well, where they're trying to go and grab it while traveling around the world. It's just a lot of fun, and honestly, it's kind of a tragedy that this hasn't even become a major franchise because like there have been some promises for years that we would get a sequel, but unfortunately it has not happened. But
Yeah,
this
didn't
is
they originally say that Peter Jackson was going to make the next one? That
yes, because
yeah, that Spielberg made the first and then Peter Jackson would make the second.
exactly like with and that's another beautiful thing about Tintin is that this is a collaboration between two admirable giants of cinema with Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson. And in this
Hmm.
case here, Spielberg was the director and Peter Jackson was the producer. And at one point they were going to go and swap around like their roles and stuff. But still,
Yeah.
like you got the elements of both these filmmakers, and together when they would bring out something like Tintin, it's just absolutely wonderful. So I just have to
Yeah.
go and include this one here.
It's a great pick. I kind of forgot about it, but yeah, I love that movie, and I'll never understand why the Academy decided that it wasn't eligible for Best Animated Feature when they had already, I think, the previous year or earlier, they had already nominated Monster House, which was also stop motion. I mean motion capture. They'd already nominated Monster House, which was motion capture as well. So I don't understand why Tintin was considered not eligible for the award when Monster House was. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that's the Academy for you. But yeah, it's a great adventure, good mystery. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy Tintin.
Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
Well, I'll do mine in alphabetical because why not? Let's do the same. So my lowest one is actually I do have a little bit of I think a recency bias on my list. And it's just because I think the art form of CG animation is just evolving and becoming so interesting in the last few years. that it's exciting. And one of my lowest in the alphabet is from last year. It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. I absolutely loved this movie. I thought the animation was so cool. I loved the way that you could literally see like the artist, the sketch like going off into the edges, like it looked like somebody actually drawing in a way that, like, some people were like, oh, it's Spider-Verse light. I don't agree. I think it had like a little bit of a gritty, I mean, it's hard because Spider-Verse has like every kind of animation that could exist. So yeah. But I think that it had enough of its own unique palette and style to it, for me at least. And I loved the fact that they got young people voicing the turtles, so it really felt like teenagers. I thought that they had like a really nice chemistry, all of them, and you really felt like you were watching a coming of age story, not just, which I've never felt like with the turtles. And so that was fun. I liked the way they used music. I just really enjoyed it. It was creative and different, and I'm just super loving this hybrid style that we're experimenting with right now in animation, and it's just an exciting time to be an animation fan.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, I will say that when it comes to Mutant Mayhem, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan. And for me personally, it's because I feel like the story plays a little bit too safe, where it is the typical fish out of water story trying to find their place. And especially with something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I feel like it is kind of crime where you would have like this wild concept, and yet the story kind of plays it safe as kind of like this typical kids flick. So that right there really gave it some points off for me. But I do agree that when it does something right, it does it amazingly well, and like some of the best of that particular year. The animation, I'm definitely on your side on that one. I love the underground comic style that they really went out with. Like, it's an absolute mess. It's absolutely ugly to look at, all in the best ways possible. Like, this is grit. Like, in a way, this is like grittiness that hit its mark very, very well. It's like it's an ugly duckling story. It's like so ugly it kind of goes back to becoming beautiful.
Well, and I just like that
also,
it felt like actual teenagers. I think it's the first time in a Ninja Turtles movie that I felt that way.
I was about to say, that's another thing I also really love, is that, like, I feel like this is the first time where we legit got teenagers playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because back then, like, when they, the reason why they're considered teenagers is because, well, they're Ninja Turtles who still have a lot to learn. But this time around, like, they nailed the feeling that these are actual kids, that these are legitimate teenagers. And yeah, they can have their cringy moments, but that's what teenagers do. And I mean, like, even me and Rachel, we went through that moment where we were cringy when we were teenagers. But that, that's just how it is. And the way they captured it is just magnificent. And so far, I would say among the best versions of the turtle characters themselves. So even though I would agree that it would be among the best list because I wish that story would have been better. But for the points that, like, it did well, I understand where you're coming from completely.
All right, what do you have next?
My next one, and just a fair warning, because this is going to be the start of a pattern when it comes to some of the films on my list. How to Train Your Dragon 2. Yes, I'm going with the second one in particular. Now, I remember back when the first movie came out back in 2010, it was one of those films where I felt like, yeah, it was good, but I didn't feel like it was great. Like, again, the story didn't really capture me that much, and I felt like with Hiccup, especially with Jay Baruchel's performance, it was kind of annoying at times. But then the second movie came in, and I was like, okay, now I see where the hype is from. Now I get why people are loving it. And with How to Train Your Dragon 2, it's pretty much you take take what they did great in the first movie and you add so much more to it. Like you already got the amazing world building from the first film, like with the Isle of Berk and the relationship between kings and dragons. But now this time around, they found a way that they could go and expand it, not only with new dragons, but also looking into the lore of the individual characters. Hiccup, I would say, got a massive glow up compared to the first, where Jay Baruchel's performance is not just more tolerable, but is actually pretty good. Where like even I could get engaged with Hiccup's adventure, but also the relationship with his mother that he recently discovered that she is alive, and then they would start bonding. And then like you've also got the extra layer of when Stoic also enters the scene and he gets reunited with with her, and it's such a heartfelt moment. And that's one thing I would say is great that not many people probably would talk about with the second film, is that the heart is at its strongest with How to Train Your Dragon 2 amongst all the franchise.
Huh,
like they nailed it beautifully with all those characters, and especially with Stoic, because I'm not going to spoil anything, but some of the things that like some of his moments, they like, oh my god, they really do stand out, and it's like, and oh my god, it's really going to capture your heart. And sometimes the directions they would go, yeah, DreamWorks would be bold enough to legit go there with it. But also, you got the villain as well, in which we meet Draco, I believe. I think that is the villain. I could be wrong, but like coming in as like this giant brute who found a way to like control the dragons in order to harness power. And like you could like he really does feel like a true threatening opponent because of the fact that like not because of like the guy himself, but because of like his ability to control dragons, even some of the biggest ones out there. So like so yeah, like it really does feel like the people at Berk, that they have met their match. And not to mention all like the use of dragons, like the way, like yeah, it's pretty great what they did with the first, but then the second one really expanding it and really showing us more, like not only showing us more variety of dragons, but also showing where, you know, showing like a hidden habitat that they do have, like where they would come from. It's all so overall I feel like with How to Train Your Dragon 2, it's the one that I feel like really did help cement the whole franchise to become what it is. It's just a phenomenal movie, and I'd even go far and say one of the best things that DreamWorks has ever put out.
this is so interesting because I have the first one on my list. And
Oh,
yeah, and I think that all three are strong. I would recommend all three. I enjoyed all three. I think it's a very good trilogy. But here's my argument for the first being the best. I think that it's the
okay.
one where you really get that relationship between Toothless and Hiccup that builds and that bond between the two of them. And yes, we've seen like boy and dog, boy and dragon. We've seen this storyline a number of times, but I prefer, in my opinion, the second one, even though I did enjoy it. I do think the second one gets a little convoluted at times with the alphas and all the lore, and I just prefer this like simple story of Hiccup standing up to his dad, standing up to his culture. He's not going to do what isn't right in his heart, and I prefer that over this, in my opinion, a little bit convoluted plot line with the alphas and the dragons and all of that. I also feel like that they let the mom off the hook way too easy. I mean, she has faced almost no repercussions for abandoning her family, and it's just really like, okay, she's back. Like what? Like you would have like major issues, you know, like you'd have to sort out and deal with. And I felt like that because she's like a strong woman or something, like we're not supposed to kind of question her and her choices, but like that was wrong. She should not have done that. And I didn't feel like the script kind of put her to task for that she just left her child. And so those are the sticking points for me with 2. But I don't dislike it. I do think that anytime these movies have Hiccup and Toothless flying, I absolutely love. It's so beautiful, and the music is always so great. And I do agree that I think Jay Baruchel's performance does get better in the second and third movies. And you do get to see, it's nice to see a character really grow into a leader. He starts out as this just real awkward character, and by the end of the third movie, not only is he a strong leader, which you typically don't see that kind of leader in certainly fantasy films, but also he's still got that compassion and that kindness that he started out in the first movie. So yeah, it's a strong. So everybody will have their favorites of the 3, but that's why the first one is my favorite.
All right. Well, I'm sure when we do get to that one, you'll go more into it, right?
Well, I think I covered it pretty good.
Okay. I was just wondering. It was are we also going to get back into it? Because I also put in my piece on the first. Now, okay, I might as well go and say it now, because with the first movie, I do get it. It is definitely a solid feature, and I've already praised a lot of the elements, like the animation, the world building, wonderful. Some of the best that DreamWorks put out there. But for me, what I would argue, why is it that it's not as strong as the second one, is mainly because of that, as you mentioned, it does have that simple plot line of boy meets dragon and stuff, and it kind of follows some of the similar steps of other, I guess you could say, environmental animated movies out there in general, not just animated films like Disney's Pocahontas or Atlantis, or maybe a little bit of Atlantis, but also with what else? Avatar and stuff like that. But yeah, it kind of follows those similar beats. But one thing that just doesn't work as strongly for me is regarding the character of Hiccup. I am not a fan of Hiccup in the first movie. I do find him a bit annoying, and I feel like that is kind of a sticking point where if you cannot get on board, if you cannot if you can't support Hiccup, if you're not on his side, then it's going to be hard to really follow the rest of the movie, at least in terms of its narrative and stuff like that. So
I'll be really curious. People listening, let us know what you think. Which one do you like the best? Or maybe there's some out there that like the third one the best. Put in the comments. Put
in the hidden world, or they'll put in the holiday special.
Welcome to the Pilot Podcast. My name is BJ.
And my name is Me Too. And we promise this promo is worth it, so please don't skip ahead.
We're 2 judgy friends who put our judgmental skills to work for you. We review the pilot episodes of new and popular shows and shows that our listeners request to answer your question, should I watch this?
Look, a lot of us are spending a lot more time at home, and yes, we should be reading and trying new projects and enriching ourselves, but does anything beat binging a great show?
Let us take the guesswork out of deciding what your next show will be. Tune in to The Pilot Podcast at thepilotpodcast.com.
All right. So next, since we're doing this alphabetic, next I have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And this is it's hard to judge Across the Spider-Verse just yet because we've only seen half the story. And so for me, I kind of have to wait until I see the whole thing to decide. But I do think that as of right now, I feel like that I like this first one better because it's just, I think it's a little tighter in storytelling. There's a couple spots in the Cross that I thought got a little exposition heavy. Both excellent films, but this one I really enjoyed the story of Miles and him, figuring out what he wants in his life and him sort of dealing with his parents and his uncle. and everything, and the animation completely blew me away. I remember I went to that 20-minute preview that they did before Venom. It was like the only reason I went to see Venom was because I wanted to see the Spider-Verse preview, and I was my mouth agape. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, I'll never forget the leap of faith scene. I mean, that scene is so amazing, and the music, just every part of it is outstanding. It's just it's probably one of my favorite movies of like all time. Certainly, it might be my favorite comic book movie, that or Wonder Woman, because I just have a special connection with Wonder Woman. But I love this movie, and I just think it's so exciting that they chose to, instead of just making an animated film, they chose to really elevate the whole genre and challenge everybody and say, we're gonna make something really special.
I think it is safe to
or the
say
whole
that
medium,
Into
I
the
should say, not genre.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you just saved yourself dozens of like angry comments right there. But yeah, I think it is safe to say that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the most groundbreaking anime feature we've had in recent years. Like, this is the one that truly is a game changer, and truly unexpected that it's from Sony Pictures Animation of all companies. And not just that, but the fact
year
that
before they had Emoji Movie.
The year prior, they had one of if the worst animated feature of all time, at least from a major studio. So them coming in with something like this, it's like, what the? It's like that. It's one of the biggest glow ups that you've ever seen in the medium. It's wild, and for me, I would say I wouldn't necessarily call it a perfect movie. Like, there are some moments where I do feel like the story that, it kind of becomes what it's. I guess you could say that, like, it tries to revolutionize what is a superhero film, but then it kind of slowly becomes a typical superhero film again. But I will say, with the animation, like, of course, going all stylized and presenting like a variety of different animation styles interacting with each other at the same time, just absolutely glorious, and like one of the greatest, or possibly the greatest achievement from the studio that they have done. So definitely wonderful there. The characters as well are fantastic, especially with Miles Morales, and how he experienced trying to become Spider-Man, yet having a hard time to to blend in with the rest. But also with it's also worth mentioning Peter B. Parker is a great mentor as well. Like, kind of like this older middle-aged Spider-Man went through his went through his tragic life, but now has to teach Miles about how to be a Spider-Man. But as of course, like,
all the side characters are so fun.
Oh yeah, no, the side characters are great. It's one of those that you walk out with an absolute favorite, and I mean, like, being a cartoon guy myself, I mean, like, I have to prioritize Spider-Ham, at least as one of my favorites there. Definitely the most memorable film performance from John Mulaney. But also, like, the action, like, this is literally comic book action coming to life on the big screen, more so than what you would find in either of the live action Marvel or DC films. So yeah, I think overall, while I will get to later and discuss about Across the Spider-Verse, but I do agree that this set Into the Spider-Verse definitely set a brand new standard when it comes to animation.
So what do you have next?
My next up, well, I might as well stay in the realm of DreamWorks. I got Kung Fu Panda 2. Yes, I got another sequel. I told you there's going to be a pattern going on. And for me, I really do like the Kung Fu Panda movies. They are they are kind of like the epitome of awesomeness in animation. The first movie started off on a great note. The third movie, not as great, but still really, really good and heartfelt. But the second one is where they take all their elements and really put them to the best. This is where everything is so elevated. The character of Poe, not only enjoyably funny thanks to the performance of Jack Black, with Poe, like, yeah, he's enjoyably funny thanks to the performance by Jack Black. But there's also an element that is very bittersweet when you first learn about the origins of the pandas, and first movie, Poe is literally the only panda that you see throughout this film. And it shows the backstory related to the villain Lord Shen, where they just flat out say that there was a full-on genocide, that he sets out to exterminate all the pandas out there so that this prophecy would not be fulfilled. And over time, like, you learn more and more about what it is and how this psychologically affects Poe, and like, you kind of see how he would come in terms with his past. And that's why there's kind of like this underlying deep message about like, in a way, discussing about what inner peace is, especially for yourself, and coming in terms with some trauma that you may experience in the past. Like, even though for Poe, like, what he like, the last time he ever saw his mother was like when he was a baby, but he still has those like those visions, those icons, those like little clues of what has occurred, and like how it still mentally affects him. And then over time you see him trying to come in terms and to be at peace with what happened so that he can move on to the present. It's very strong, it is very deep, and like, it definitely pulls on your heartstrings. So they did amazingly with that. And I mean, of course, it goes without saying, the kung fu, like all the action scenes, definitely amazing, definitely a lot of fun. And especially with the introduction of cannons now added to the mix, it may, like, now it adds kind of like this new flavor to the martial arts action that was already great in the first film, but now they elevate it in the second one. Especially when they would take down that giant temple, and then like you see the Furious Five and Poe trying to go and escape it. Definitely great. And then there's also the villain Lord Shen, whom I still say is the best villain among the Kung Fu Panda movies, and I would even say one of the best non-Disney or Pixar animated villains ever. Like, this is a power hungry villain who he has no limits. For him, like, he will get rid of anything that is out of his way. Like, he doesn't even care if it's anything that would be considered like kid friendly. He will do so in order to maintain power and in order to go and gain power as well. Like, it's because of him why Kung Fu Panda 2 has a surprisingly high death count. Like, there's a lot of casualties that occur in Kung Fu Panda, and it is mainly because of him. And not to mention the incredible performance by Gary Oldman. Honestly, it's kind of a shock he hasn't done a lot of voiceovers ever since, because honestly, what he has done in Kung Fu Panda 2 is just marvelous. So yeah, for me, I have to include Kung Fu Panda 2, a fantastic sequel, and easily best that we have gotten in the whole series.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's very strong. It didn't make my list, but I really do. I agree with everything you said. So it'd be a strong honorable mention.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
My next in my alphabetical order, I take you back to 2022. Me as a critic, I'm going through all these Oscar screeners, and that year I had so many unpopular opinions. There were so many of the Oscar contenders I didn't care for, and I'm just going through. Oh, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. This is going to be terrible. Stick it in, and my mouth was agape. I can't overstate how surprised I was by this movie. How much it floored me. I will always treasure that experience because it doesn't happen that much as a critic. You know, you can become kind of jaded, a little cynical sometimes if you're not careful. And to be completely wowed by cinema is like a special moment and experience, and you kind of live for that. And I wish it had been on the big screen the first time I saw it. But I just was so impressed with the animation in this movie. What they did, especially that first 20 minutes, that fight scene is so beautiful. And I mean, I just never seen anything quite like it. It was stunning to me. I absolutely love the wolf. I think it is one of the scariest villains I've ever seen. When I did finally get to see it in the theater, I was sitting close to this. There was this little girl, and every time the wolf came on, she was panicking, like so scared. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it's been so long since there's been an actual scary villain in an animated film. And because they've just been doing all these like generational trauma and, you know, all these things lately. And so that was so refreshing. It was so exciting. And I loved all the layers of the story. And I loved Puss's journey through the story. I like it more every time I see it. It ended up being it was my favorite movie of the whole year, that year. And I just one of my favorite animated films in the end. I absolutely loved it. So, and it was just such a cool, and I so admired them because they could have easily phoned it in and just done a Puss in Boots lazy sequel, but they pushed themselves and they really tried to make something special, and I really admire them for that.
Yeah, I'll just say right now, and I might as well go into my piece on, because I also have Puss in Boots: The Last Wish on my list. And the thing that makes it so, captivating and so unexpected on how good this is that, one thing that I feel like not many people admire about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is that, in a way, it's kind of like a reboot of the whole Shrek franchise.
Yeah.
Like, they took a massive risk of taking what is already very popular, and even at the time, or well, technically nowadays, it's just like it's still very beloved, but they decided to go and add a new twist to it, to go and completely rewrite how it looks, how it is, how it functions, like basically flipping the entire format of Shrek and turn it into something that is completely new. And that thing, it really is high risk, and they got some high reward out of it. Like, this far surpasses the first Puss in Boots, and I actually do like the first Puss in Boots. I thought it was actually enjoyably good, but
Like decent,
we're talking
yeah.
about but we're talking about something that went from good to great. Like, they did amazingly well, especially with the animation. Now, like, again, going fully stylized with it, but now becoming a lot more painterly. Like, it's literally trying to look like a painting coming to life. And even the designs, they got a great update as well. Now characters, they're not trying to look realistic like they used to in the past Shrek films. Like, now they are more stylized. Now they actually do look more animated. And there are even some characters that they technically already showed up in the previous Shrek films, but now they got a big update. And that is the case with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where now, like, they kind of got this Cockney English update where now they're a crime family. But it's
And that arc
amazing
was
also.
so good. I love that story.
Oh yeah, and their arc is fantastic, especially like trying to emphasize about what is family, and you know, you look into Goldilocks' perspective of like what she is looking for in a family, and you know, it's kind of like this conflict if the bears are actually a family or if she wants to find her own like human family and stuff. So already like that aspect is great. But with the animation, it's obvious that there is a clear influence from Spider-Verse. And there was at one point during production, and one of the Spider-Verse directors, Bob Persichetti, was involved as a director as well. And you could tell that, yeah, the influence actually worked out, where they took the best elements of that movie and put it onto them and found a way to still make it their own. And I think it's also worth mentioning, and speaking of Goldilocks, but also it's amazing the amount of villains that they have, because it's technically not just one. It's like you technically have three. I already talked about Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You also have the wolf, aka Death, whom, yeah, oh my god, his presence is so intimidating. Like it does very well to capture that set where you feel like Puss, where you get scared whenever you hear the wolf coming, like especially that whistle, like when you hear it, that's like you got that sensation of like fight or flight. So yeah, already the wolf character, fantastic. And then of course you got Jack Horner, who is also worth mentioning, and well, coincidentally again, bringing back John Mulaney here, just like we just got someone who's just straight up unapologetically a villain. Like technically, you could argue is the least fleshed out of all the characters, but this is not necessarily the kind that's supposed to have like any complex backstory or anything like that. This is a villain that's just supposed to be fun. This is like a bad guy who just fully embraces being a bad guy. And honestly, they did great with that as well.
Yeah, but also Burrito, oh my gosh, I love if you were to see my phone, my wallpaper. I love Burrito so much. And I mean, if you had asked me before watching it, is the new am I going to be having the conversation in my head, is the new Puss in Boots movie going to be a literal masterpiece? I would have said you're insane. And yet that's just the reality. And so I just give them all the credit in the world. It's what they did. And
there is one more thing I do want to go and mention, and considering that we are talking about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, I got to go and mention how it handles the message of death. And in a way,
it's true.
This is so far the best movie out there that is themed to YOLO. Like, it's one of the best YOLO movies out there. I know it sounds weird, but the way that they handle message about mortality, about making the most about your life, that's why, you know, it's kind of debatable if the wolf is actually a full-on villain. As terrifying and threatening as he is, you know, he's one of those
he's just doing his job.
That
in a way,
he's doing his job. He's not wrong. And what he is arguing with Puss, he's not actually wrong. You know, like, and it is, and like, see, like the flaws with Puss, how like he's so careless with his life and stuff like that, where he had, you know, it's trying to put him in this place and try to make him realize like why it's important to live and why it is important to be aware about your own mortality. And not to mention like how they show like panic-inducing like showing
it's true
panic-inducing moments, like
such like a good movie.
Like one of the most memorable scenes is when there's like a giant battle between like all the with all the bakers, and like Puss in Boots and his girlfriend and Perdito and stuff like that. But then suddenly the whole movie stops to let you know that like, yo, the wolf is there, just saying. And Puss has to run away because he was legit having a serious panic attack. And then like of course, it is followed by that heartfelt moment with Perdito, come in to actually go and calm him down. So
well, and also you have Goldilocks and her learning to accept her chosen family. So there's that storyline too. I mean, it's just such a rich movie. We could go on for a whole hour probably about it. I think I'll probably divide this also into two because we did about 2 hours, so it's like perfect. The divide. I think that will be good. But thank you so much for doing this. This was a lot of fun. I love talking about these films, and it's just such an exciting time to be an animation fan. It's I think the most exciting moment for the medium since the Disney Renaissance. I really do. I believe that.
Oh yeah, like like all these studios, whether it be Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, Sony, what have you, like they're really putting on their A game so far.
Yeah.
And I mean, all these I know like these studios, like they'll have their ebb and flow and some amazing moments and some not so good moments, but like yeah, like we're like when these studios when all these studios are strong, like oh boy, do they really go all out.
Yeah. Well, so how can people follow you, your content, everything you do?
Well, for me, the main thing that you can go and find me is on YouTube with Electric Dragon 505. And as for everything else, whether it be Patreon, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or Blue Sky, you can find me as Animat or Matt Brune Animat.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. And also, I'll put the playlist for all of my top 50 episodes, including all of our episodes together. So you should check that out and check out the Hallmarkies podcast if you want more of my Christmas content. And also, if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. Really appreciate that. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. Also have a Patreon group and merch store where you get hashtag Animation Junkie shirts. Check that out. And thanks so much. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye.